This is the Best or Worst podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Koji Stephen Sakai and M. Martin Mapoma.
Welcome. This is Koji.
And this is Martin.
And this is the Best or Worst podcast. This is episode 35. And as you can see, I know it's been 35 episodes. It's been crazy. And
how many of them have been during COVID? You counted? You're good at that kind of stuff.
I have not counted. We've done a bunch during COVID time, but we've got a lot of great people during that time because now we're using Zoom and not recording off my off our studio at my house, so we're good. Yeah. But we do have a guest today, another guest, and his name is Andrew. Yep. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, hey, how are you boys doing?
We're good. How are you?
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome.
Andrew is he has a show called Andyland Radio with Andrew Willis. He covers politics, celebrity, pop culture. I took a listen earlier today, and I loved your stuff. So I'm definitely a new fan of yours. So we're super happy to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Well, I'm a lot of energy. I'm your cup of coffee in the morning. I'll tell you that much and more. I'm located up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. As you can see, I thought I would show some of that. Actually, this here was painted. It's a huge mural, and it was actually painted by my great-grandfather. And it's in the basement, in the rumpus room of my great-grandparents' house. That's where I am right now.
Wow, they had a rumpus room?
They do. I should show it to you. There's the wood paneling. It's got Oh, yeah.
Oh, geez.
Wait,
was your grandfather a hunter?
He wasn't a hunter. He was a painter. He loved Bob Ross. And I remember we would spend a lot of time watching Bob Ross on PBS painting. And as you can see, this is a very Bob Ross kind of feel.
Literally thought that looked like Bob Ross when it first came on.
Yes.
When you went to get your mic, I was like, wow, that looks like a Bob Ross painting.
Yeah.
Funny story. My one of the classes I teach screenwriting in, one of the students is doing a script about the guy who actually taught Bob Ross everything, but didn't become as famous as him. And he's really bitter. He got really bitter about it. So that just, it's funny that Bob Ross is constantly coming around my life. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do? I mean, I know you have a show.
Right. So I've been doing this show for about 2 years now. It's a pop music, celebrity interview, guest show. So every show we have 9 new songs on from different rock and pop musicians from around the world. And we do a celebrity interview or an in-studio interview, and it's just a lot of fun. It's really helped me be able to meet a lot of musicians that I would have never met before. Fun fact, some of the best rock music is coming out of Australia right now. So just a fun tip for everyone. If you want to listen to some good upbeat rock music, I can give you a list of names.
Yeah, Australia's always had some great music.
Yeah.
And how did you get into this? What was the idea of getting into music and everything like that?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story, clearly, because here we are, and I'm an interesting person, I think. So just to toot my own horn a little, because I need to. It's been a hell of a day. But I actually used to work at a country club, which wasn't a lot of fun. I mean, it was boring, and I did it for the money. And there was this really awesome dude who owned like 140 radio stations. And he asked me one day, he said, what do you want to do? Like, when are you going to take your life seriously? And I said, well, I'm in school right now. I want to be a lawyer. And he said, you don't want to be a lawyer. There's enough of those. And he said, why don't you take your life seriously? Come to my office and meet with me, and we can talk about your career. So I met with him at his office, brilliant man. And he showed me all the divisions of his company. He said, which one would you like to work in? And I said, well, definitely not in legal. I said, I want to work in broadcasting. It looks like a lot of fun. So he hooked me up with an internship. I worked that. And since 2 years ago, I've been right forward moving into broadcasting. So I'm going in more into television, hosting for television or for screen. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Wow. That's amazing. You had that opportunity to work with somebody who was willing to help you. Kind of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great, especially for someone who's like, I only have like $10 in my account. There's no way in hell I would have ever met this person had I not worked at, a place where they frequented. So, I mean, it goes to show you that even a little gay boy who doesn't have much of a body can still attract old businessmen to fall in love with you. It's great.
Wait, was he in love with you or?
No, he was.
Okay. I
No, he was not in love with me, but actually he ties into one of my best stories, so I could probably get into that at a later point. But no, he was not in love with me, but very kind, very he's the type of person that you know, the whole philosophy of when you come from nothing, you sure as hell know where you don't want to end up. And he really respects people who want to work. So he'll say, hey, I can give you these opportunities, but you're going to have to work for the interview. And it's up to you to impress the people with your own skills. So he was really, I didn't get where I'm going on just someone giving me a job. I actually had to interview for it and have a few panic attacks along the way.
Oh, and that's funny that you mentioned that. I mean, one of the things about sociopaths, like later, not that you're a sociopath, but it's sociopaths in general, is one of the reasons they fail in their 40s is because they don't have those people that stick up for them. They don't have the people that are saying, "Oh, this guy is great. I stand up for him." And so they end up falling because if you're always stabbing people in the back, you don't have that chance. And so, you know, what's great about your story to me is that, you know, somebody believed in you, gave you that chance, and you took it and ran with it, and now you're doing your thing, right? You're.
Well, I still have 10 years to screw it up. I'm 30, so you never know. Call me when I'm 40. We'll figure out.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's so funny you say that, Koji. It's so true. People who are sociopaths really don't make it very far, or they always end up, or something ends up happening.
Yeah, I mean, generally about 40, they start to fall apart. But you know, so you want to be a television host. You want to be, you know, you're doing a radio thing. So
yes.
Do you love music? I mean, is music your thing, or is
it's funny you ask that because I actually am not. Whenever I interview people, I'm actually going to be doing a music interview with this artist named Jim Shorts. She's from Rhode Island. And as I said to her, I said, when I do a music interview, I don't care about the music. I just care about you. So what did you do today? You know, like, what were you thinking last night when you were up late at night, like freaking out about whatever? Like, I'm more interested in people and less interested in how they perform. It's just how it is for me. But I'm definitely not a music theorist. Like, I don't understand music. I just know what gets me jumping and sweating and gets me happy.
What music is your favorite? Tell us what your favorite music and favorite band.
Okay, well, first of all, Diana Ross, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, is enough to just wake me up in the morning and give me life. It could wake the dead. It is the best song ever. It gives so much soul. I love it. I love Barry White, Love's Theme. That's actually used as one of the music beds for my program. That song is it's sexy. It's fun. It's 70s. I do like, there's this band called Pop. They were just recently on Seth Meyers' Rock Band. You know, one of my favorite songs from the album Horses by Patti Smith is Gloria, of course, or Birdland. I mean, it's a real mix and a schmear, but it's sort of like whatever gets me feeling a mood. But it's usually rock. It's really good. It has energy. It's like disco. It's disco, really, in rock form.
Do you like some of the old school bands like AC/DC and those guys?
No, I could not name an AC/DC song to save my life. And I'm not one of those people that fronts with you. I'm not playing. If I don't know, I don't even know all the Led Zeppelin albums. And I mean, name one person who does music interviews who would fucking admit that. I mean, I would. Sorry, can I swear? Can I say that? Sorry.
Yeah, you
can swear. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I would never, I'm not going to lie to people and be like, wow, that's so cool. I've heard it. My favorite thing to do is actually look at the person and be like, I have no clue who that person is. Tell me about it. And it's fun because then it creates a conversation that's real.
You should probably look into the greatest rapper of all time, Rakim.
No,
He's really good.
See, Martin has this thing where he thinks Rakim was the greatest, but we all know it's Tupac. But I actually, I've said this many times, but the second biggest regret of my life, or actually the biggest regret of my life, was not naming my son Tupac. So that's something that's really personal to me.
I'll tell you right now, Koji, I am calling him Tupac from now on.
That's fine. He's not going to answer to that. But that's interesting. That, I mean, I think it's really interesting that, you know, most of the people I know who are music journalists or who interview are super, super not snobby, but yeah, opinionated about what I love. What you said was that you want to get to know them more than
that was really cool.
Music.
I don't want to show people what I know. Who cares? You're not there for me. You're there for what is that person going to say that you don't know yet, right? So I will never ask a person Where did you get the name from for your band? Nobody cares. That's probably Googleable. I don't care about those sort of things. I want to get into like, what does that person do in their free time? Almost like when you sit and chat with them on the phone. Like, and that's why I think a lot of the people I interview, we become friends. We talk as friends on the phone even later on and develop friendships, is because I can just assume a friendship with them and it's genuine. It has nothing to do with, so tell me about this person or beef or anything like that. I don't care really.
Well, so what do you do in your spare time?
What spare time? You know what? It's funny. I'm actually going to be interning for one of the major market radio stations here in Vancouver, but it's like news. It's like typical talk news. And I'm going to be also with a television station here. So I'm going to be doing that. Plus I'm finishing my 4th year at university. I am right now doing my own show, even though I'm not doing it weekly right now, but I'm getting ready for that again. So I have a lot of stuff on the go. Plus I also take care of my lovely great grandmother. She's 92 years old. Her name is Ruth. She's a kick in the ass and a lot of fun. And yeah, so I spend a lot of time with her and support her. So I'm quite busy. I don't really have much free time, but I love what I do.
That's the key.
I Google stuff. I go on Wikipedia. I don't know. How about you? What are you guys up to? Like, what are you doing right now in quarantine?
Oh, I'm taking care of my son.
Yeah.
Taking care of my son, my family, you know, trying to get as much work as I can done. And
yeah.
Right now, trying just have to go down that rabbit hole with everything that's going on, because this whole thing has just put a big downer on everything.
Yeah.
You know, what's going on here.
How old's your son, Martin?
He's 8.
What sort of sports is he into?
Jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu and basketball. Actually, jiu-jitsu, basketball, soccer, and he's a huge Fortnite fan. He found Fortnite during quarantine, and he has taken off with it. It's crazy.
Well, and to be clear, Fortnite is not a sport. I'm just making sure that it's clear that Fortnite is not a sport.
No, but you know, gaming is here we go. Whatever. It's like golf. It's like golf. You know?
Yeah, one of my friends got his kid got a gaming scholarship to the University of Utah, and he was trying to convince me that his son was an athlete. And I said, no. I mean, it's great that he got a scholarship. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that it's definitely not an athlete.
He's an esports athlete.
Yeah, that's different. That's the thing. But what I do, right now I'm writing a ton, and I'm trying to get stuff made. I'm trying to get TV and film stuff. So I'm doing a lot of negotiations. So what's interesting about right now is that even though it's the quarantine and nobody's able to leave really in LA yet, but you're still finding that a lot of the production companies, a lot of studios are still doing a lot of work. And they're still buying, and they're still taking a lot of pitches. So I'm constantly, like, when I'm not taking care of my son, I have an 8-year-old too. That's how Martin and I know each other. But when we're not doing that, where I'm working in television and films and stuff, writing and producing it. So.
See, I love that. You're working the business. You got to do it. You got to work it for it to work you.
No, you constantly work. Yeah, I'm constantly pitching stuff. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Every person you meet, it has to be a pitch of some kind. And I think that's why this business, you can either thrive or really fail if you have sociopathic tendencies. So, I mean, talking about those, I mean, let's be real here. I mean, you kind of have to be sociopathic, one, to believe you're brilliant enough to have an idea no one's ever had, and that only you should be the one to transcend it. And yeah, you're always pitching stuff. It's like me. And that's one thing I hated when I first went to LA. And the one thing I cannot wait to get back for is that, you know, you meet someone, you talk, hey, what do you do? What are you working on? Are you really working on that? Is it greenlit? Is it done? Are you in production? Are you writing? Do you have a team? What are you doing? And then you're able to kind of pitch back. So yeah, you always got to be pitching your work.
Oh yeah, constantly.
You do. Yeah, you do.
Well,
you are your best product, as they say.
Yeah, well, you're always the best agent. But so let's get into we're at the point.
You're always your best Asian?
Agent.
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah.
That's how it kind of came out. I had to clarify.
Well, so let's get into we want to hear the best or worst moment from our guest Andrew here.
Sure.
Okay. I know what you're gonna. I want to hear the best.
Yeah, I want to hear the best too, because first it's just it's a downer time in general. I mean, we're recording this on June 3rd,
right?
So right in the middle of everything, and so but plus. You already kind of pitched us, like telling us the best story connected to your story about the guy that helped you out. So Andrew, why don't you tell us the best moment of your day?
Sure. So
Sorry, best moment of your life. Sorry.
the best moment of my life. When I first got that internship, and it was my first time thrown into a station or even around any professionals working in broadcasting, immediately I became very self-conscious because I thought, oh no, like, am I too flamboyant? Because the thing that people forget is that, yeah, Canada is progressive on some things, but a lot of the listeners in Vancouver, or just a lot of the people in general, people forget that there's like a couple big cities, and then just like with the States, there's the rest of the States, right? Like there's Los Angeles, and then there's like the rest of like, you know. So it's like, so it can get really conservative. And so I was at the station, and I was really kind of scared, and I thought, oh no, they put me into this booth. That was the first thing they did to test my voice. And I was listening back to my voice tracks with the program director, and all I could hear was like, you sound way too gay. You sound way too gay. And I felt so embarrassed because I didn't have that deep voice. So I go back to the country club, you know, I'm working, I'm serving, and I see the gentleman who helped me out, the guy who owns the studios and all that other stuff. And he asked me, he said, you know, how are things going? I said, you know, I'm really kind of nervous. Like, I don't know how I sound, and I don't know if I'm going to be good for radio or good for even television because, you know, I sound a little bit gay, and I don't want people to like be kind of weirded out by that, because some people can, right? You know? And this gentleman who, you know, to his credit, he owns a lot of churches, for one, definitely like on the right end of the spectrum, looks at me, you know, and he's in his 90s, and he looks at me, and I'm thinking like, oh, what is he going to say? And he said, you know, Andrew, don't worry about what I think, or don't worry about what anyone else thinks. He's like, if you want to talk about sex, talk about sex. If you want to talk about gay rights, talk about gay rights. He said, you know, I may not listen to these things, but these are things that if you feel like you want to talk about, you'll find an audience. And that's what matters, is finding your audience. So for me, growing up in a very conservative family where I didn't come out to any of my family, I still don't, because, you know, while they are aware that I'm gay, we'll never have that conversation because they're very, very deeply religious and very conservative. For me to tell this person who could control my future this, and have them be like, no, it's business. It's fine. It really meant a lot to me. So that's my best story ever, was that, wow, here is someone that I'm kind of coming out to that can control my career. And they're like, go for it. Be you. Don't be anything else. It was really impactful.
And how did that affect you? Kind of like, did you feel more comfortable being able to be who you are on the radio?
I got a lot more gay. I'll tell you that much. Like, you know, but it's like Martin, like imagine, or even for you, Koji, like, you know, that whole idea that you're it's weird because entertainment is an industry where you have to be put into a box in order to be sold. But sometimes you don't want to be put in that box. Or some people will say like, you're too Asian for a role, or don't, you know, be black, but like don't sound black, or don't, you know, get all jive, you know what I mean? Like, or too urban. Like that's the thing that people say. And, you know, and really you have this crisis of identity. So for me as a gay person, it's like, there's things that I feel compelled to talk about, but I don't know if I should be allowed to. And to have someone at such an early point in my career say, no, you do you, was just, it gave me power to say, no, this is what I feel passionate about, and this is what I will speak about, and no one can say no. It was great.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. You know, I can relate to that one because, you know, as an actor coming out to LA, having to like, you know, I used to get that all the time, you know, my whole thing was, I always got, you're not black enough. You're not black enough, or, you know, so
right.
when you get that kind of positive affirmation, it's really good. And again, right. Very different for you, you know, feeling like you sound gay, and him saying that to you, that's pretty impressive, considering the fact that the guy was 92 years old. And, you know, most people that age that are very successful and they have that kind of money, they're kind of shielded from really having to answer to anybody. And for the most part, they really go with what they strongly believe in. And for him to think that way is very impressive. You got lucky, because that could have gone completely the other way.
But I think that really speaks volumes to who he is as a businessman, because, you know, this gentleman's a billionaire, you know, has had dinner with Trump, you know, funds right-wing Christian groups, but at the same time is still level-headed and compassionate enough to realize that that's his choice. And my choice is to do maybe the opposite. So it speaks volumes to why he's probably so successful. And it really taught me to just let people be. They have the best intentions if you let them.
That actually makes it sound a lot more interesting when you say it like that. I didn't realize he had, dinner with Trump and funded all these right-wing things, and yet still said that to you? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's mind-blowing, but it taught me compassion, and it also taught me that, I actually had a conversation yesterday with this guy who's from Alabama, and we couldn't have been any more different, but it was the fact that I was coming at him with a place of listening instead of reacting and sympathizing and understanding where he came from. So that ties into my worst story is coming from a place where I grew up in a very racist household, and I did some really horrible racist things as a kid. I get where people are coming from. They're trying to figure it out the best they can with what little education they have and little influence they have. And if you come with them with kindness, they're not gonna, look at you as someone that's out to harm them. You're there to help. So, yeah.
I always thought of Canada as being a lot more tolerant than America.
Well, I feel on the spot. Hi, welcome. I'm the Deputy Prime Minister now for Canada.
No. I only say that because there was just an article that came out the other day where one of the you might have seen this too. He's an official in Canada. I don't know what his title is, but he was saying that Canada's not nearly as racist as does not nearly have as much systemic racism as America does. And there were Canadians who were like, that's not really true. And so to hear you say it's interesting because my experience with being in Canada, and I was there for 3 months a while back. And I say a while back, way, way back, because Koji will tell you I'm old. I had a great time there. People always would walk up to me and say, we're better than America, aren't we? And I was like, I don't know. Because I was coming here from Africa. And we passed through Canada first. So it was interesting that was what everyone wanted to know. Aren't we nicer than the Americans? And, anyway, so.
Well, I think also too, it's what you choose to see. So in my own experience, I grew up, so I'm 30, so I grew up in elementary school throughout the 90s, middle school, early 2000s, and high school, and in elementary school, in Vancouver especially, throughout the 80s, there was an increase in Asian immigration to Vancouver. And you saw a lot of racism towards Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino was a little bit later than the immigrants coming in. But you saw a lot of Asian racism, a lot. And as a kid, when I was in elementary school, we were taught to tell on other students if they were speaking Chinese or Mandarin Cantonese. And I would do it. And it was like a fun game that we used to do as kids was to go and tap and listen to see if the Asian students were speaking, not English, and then just run and tell the teacher and try to get them in trouble. So that's a really good example of how racism is taught, because then you immediately from an authoritarian figure point people as a different face, as a different look, as different than you, and you learn to hate them and to learn to be rewarded to hate them. And that was my early experience with, I think, how racism really started. And I was very racist throughout elementary school and throughout high school, of course, to Asian students. And it was something that to me seemed normal. It was rewarded. It was never questioned. No one ever checked it. And now that I'm in my 30s and throughout my 20s and looking back, and thank God having the ability to go to university, because I'll tell you one thing for free. My parents, they couldn't afford school. I couldn't afford university. I'm doing it all now in student loans much later in life. But I really unlearned a lot of that racism that I grew up with, and that just seems so normal. So it's important that people have these conversations and they don't hide it. Because I'll tell you one thing, a lot of us did racist stuff and we still continue to do it. So we need to, people aren't checking it for us. We need to check ourselves and speak up.
And also during, just as a heads up to everybody out there, during World War II, the Canadian government did lock up all the Japanese Canadians.
Yeah.
And and the Japanese Canadians were treated worse than the Japanese Americans. I mean, the Japanese Americans had a terrible time, but Japanese Canadians were they had to stay in these kind of places a lot longer than in America. But in general, I mean, at least you didn't vote a Trump in, so I'll give you guys that.
Yeah,
that is true. That is true. But hey, we had Harper, and that was pretty interesting for the 2 terms he was in. So yeah.
Wow. It's fun. Do you ever run into some of your old classmates from high school that were Asian?
Tell you the truth, no. Because I think a lot of them were smart and said, we're getting the hell out of here. Like, we're going to go to bigger, better places than this small town. But no, I joke. I haven't though. But I do have, it's really interesting. I do have a half sister and a half brother who are both Black. And I noticed that, my family chose to adopt me. Like my great grandparents chose to adopt me. And, my half brother and half sister, they weren't. And I see how their life was like severely affected because of that. And it breaks my heart to think that there's even racism within families. Like, it's like people can even look at their own children and say like, someone's better off than the other just because of what they look like us. Like, it sickens me, but yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry. Your grandparents adopted you?
My great grandparents adopted me, and the other 2 weren't adopted by me or by them. And
so they go into the system, or what happened to them?
One of them stayed with their father. She's I think 23, and she has 3 children. Oh. And then you have the other one. He was born with cerebral palsy, and he was adopted by a really good family. And they were able to really help him out. But I think, I also think I wasn't in that system. I was in a different system. So I'm also really able to sympathize with people who are in foster care because it's not a great place.
It never is. It never is. Wow.
We got dark.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we're supposed to be talking about the best moment, and now all of a sudden it's these very sad moments. But
it's in the air right now, man. It's like people don't want to feel down, but it just comes, dude.
I think you're talking from a very American perspective. I mean, outside of America, nobody. I mean, it's not it's not as much of an issue as what's going on here.
Who have you talked to? You talk to my brother in Zambia, he'll tell you a completely different story.
Yeah, but in China, nobody cares what's happening in America. Russia,
but those are 2 countries. But those are 2 countries that never care about what's happening here.
No, I know, but I'm just saying it's a very American centric. That like for us, it's a very traumatic time, but I think for a lot of people, it's not. I mean, for the rest, a lot of parts of the world, it's not nearly as traumatic. I mean, but that's my point of view. But let's get back to you and kind of this moment. What I find really interesting kind of about this moment is that, what it kind of meant to you. And do you ever think about, being like when you're more, when you're kind of in the twilight of your career and kind of have a little bit more power, being able to do something like that in the future? Is that something you've ever thought about?
I think the first thing you have to do is the only thing you have if you don't have a platform is you have your truth and you have to speak it. And as you gain a platform, you have to stay true to those early beginnings. And you cannot all of a sudden clean up and become very marketable to you can't be happy cake, pie, bubblegum. You have to, unless that's your choice, unless you want to be Ellen, great. But I mean, if you want to actually use your platform to make a statement, I think, then you're going to have to be truthful and get to the nitty gritty. And I have no problem, retelling stories of when I did, let's call them what they are, hate crimes, and people have to get really comfortable at getting really open about saying that, yes, in our past, I have committed hate crimes. When I beat up on a boy because, he was speaking a different language and I'm like in grade 2 and I'm, we get into a fight, that was racism. That was a hate crime. There's no way of whatever. So I think we just have to be more comfortable about exposing our own demons. Because if you don't, you're not going to learn. And other people aren't going to get comfortable having these talks about racism, because everyone needs to be talking about racism, but they cannot be doing it in a way where they feel like they have not been a part of it.
So was your racism specifically targeted towards the Asian community?
Well, because I mean, that was the thing, was that if I was in Alabama, I mean, what's the other predominant community aside from the white community? It's the Black community, right? So in Vancouver, you know, that visual difference, that racial difference was really white and Asian or South Asian. So for me, it was normal to call someone a chink, and that was okay. It was normal to call someone a gook, and that was okay. And it was normal to look at Asian people and think of them as like peasants in their village ways, you know, and to look down on them. And I say this because, again, it also ties in with the whole religious aspect. You go to church, it's this idea that these people are savages, that they're lesser than you, that they're filthier than you, that they don't have the same customs as you, that you are superior to them because you have hundreds of years of English, you know, colonialism that's, you know, allowed you to create great art and create all this greatness. I mean, you're taught this idea of you being great and you being superior, and it may not be as direct as that, but it's still in the textbooks that we read. You know, it's all from this English, from this European perspective of greatness. So yeah, when you look at someone that's culturally different, you don't learn to respect that cultural difference or appreciate it or be curious about it. You look at it as something that is disgusting and not appropriate. So it's so explainable why I had these racist tendencies growing up as a kid. But now I look at it and I'm like, no, it's just it's just how people do things differently, and that doesn't make them any different. It's silly.
It's actually interesting that you talk about this because in my community where I came from, I had obviously the opposite perspective or opposite situation because you know, my community went from like being almost no white Asian people to being like a majority Asian people. So there was definitely a lot of like racism and fighting and stuff on both sides.
Where'd you go to high school? I keep forgetting. Michelle, I keep forgetting. Michelle asked me, and I couldn't.
I went to San Marino High School. So it's it went from being like 0% Asian, like say in the 80s, you know, to being like 75% Asian. And with that transition came a lot of really tense like situations.
Oh, I bet.
The different races of people. But the difference though also is that, you know, most of the people that I went to school with they came from really, really wealthy families who had a lot of means. And so their English was perfect because even in China, they were doing like international, Taiwan, they were doing international school. So their English was like British, you know? So it's like,
I was going to say,
that was me. That was us.
It was
international schools.
It was very different. It was a very different situation, but it was still like, I felt that it's, you know, it does mean a lot that you say that because, you know, I remember thinking that it was really kind of an interesting scenario that just.
I really want to ask you, Koji, one thing that I remember I had this neighbor and we went to this like Asian open market. Like it was kind of near Chinatown. There was lots and I enjoyed it. And I remember like at a young age, remembering the difference about how like when I go shopping with my great grandparents or my aunt, how it's so much different than how my neighbor goes grocery shopping. And I remember saying to my aunt, like, I really like this food. I'd really like to whatever. And her being like, it is disgusting. Like, did you ever feel like you were like, can you maybe explain some of the racism that you encountered? But that was like something that was like, there was even like, it was right down to like how Asian people grocery shop was considered repulsive. Like they touch all the fruit, they touch all the stuff. It's crazy. But again, if people take time to reflect on their own personal encounters with things, I mean, you know, it's crazy the stuff that will come out. But I just remember even that, like how there was such a judgment about like, you know, my grandma would even say like, why do those Asian people have to touch all the food in the grocery store? And I'm like, maybe they're just trying to feel if it's right. Like, I don't know. But it was like, there was such a stigma. Oh yeah.
Well, I do want to say that for growing up because I was Asian American, I'm fourth generation, but mom's from Japan. But yeah, I think that there's this push to try to be as normal, you know, as possible. So like when I was a kid, I didn't want to bring like strange food. I wanted peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Right.
You know, I I wanted to, like, when people came over my house, I wanted to make sure it didn't smell like Asian food. I wanted it to smell like, like, I don't know, pasta. I don't know what else we were making, but it was very, I mean, it was sensitive in that, like, I knew what was happening. Nowadays things are super different, I think, in that, like, there's this authenticity that teenagers want that didn't exist when we were kids, when I was a kid, especially, that it was like very much about pushing my Americanness or my being like everybody else, white, basically, as opposed to being this Asian. And then at home, I ate my Asian things, or I secretly ate my Asian things. But that was a very, I mean, I don't know about the I've never heard the grocery shopping thing, but the food thing is.
Well, it was just that stereotype of, like, that Asian people, like, are frantic about when they're shopping, grabbing lots of things, being very, like, aggressive in their, like, purchasing of stuff, like, asking for deals, asking for whatever. I mean, it's just like, and that's the thing, is that, like, I remember this is so real, because I remember this, and it was a shared experience. It was never like, obviously we don't maybe not remember it as much now because times have changed so much, but 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I remember that was, like, the stereotype of Asian people, was that they were cheap, that their houses smelled funny, and that, like, that they were, like, taking up space. And that was, like, and that had to do with Vancouver. I'm speaking specifically about Vancouver, is that it was very, like, British, very English for a long time. And within the 80s, it was like within 10 years, it really increased in the Asian population. So it really pissed a lot of people off. And then, like, for example, we have this place called the country club that I actually worked at. They, to this day, still have, like, no women on certain days in certain parts of the country club. It's actually located on a place called the British Properties, which excluded, at the time, sales. They wouldn't sell to Jewish people, to Asian people, I'm certainly to blacks. So it was like, there's a very racist history to Vancouver, and I think we just choose to forget it.
Wow.
This has been a really, really great conversation. I actually didn't know. I always thought, when I thought of Vancouver, I always thought of good Chinese food, because when I've been in Vancouver, I've eaten really, really good Chinese food. But I've never.
It's the best.
I just watched an episode of I think it was Roy Choi or someone like that, and they were in Vancouver, and they were talking about the Asian experience in Vancouver when it comes to food. Yeah, so
specifically Chinese food, but they.
It's changed a lot. Like, I have to say, it's changed a lot, but especially with like the fact that the world has literally turned into, like, do the right thing over the last, like, week, I kind of, like, feel compelled to want to speak about this and be open about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. How can people follow you? How can people hear your show? How can people follow you personally and your show?
If you want to follow me, it's at Andyland Radio across the internet. You can always go to andylandradio.com for episodes. I have lots there. I have nothing new out yet. But if you want to catch me when we do come back, you can listen to me on CITR 101.9 FM, Wednesdays, 10:30 Pacific, 12:30 Central.
Cool.
And what about you? Can they follow you there personally, or do you?
Yes, everything is under that brand. I do a lot of fun stories. You can see my great grandmother Ray. Coffee is the best coffee ever, and she can actually Tendies and McDonald's, and it's really cute. So I do like little stories about that. But we've taken a break right now to kind of talk about other things and have other discussions. But when we can return, we will with some really fun content.
Great, and everybody, we'll be putting your all the links in our show notes. So if you're definitely interested in hearing, you could take a look at that. So thank you for the talk. Thank you, Martin. And please, if you could rate, review, subscribe to our podcast, it'd be a really great way for us to get out there. And
drop us a note. Let us know you're listening. All that good stuff.
And come join us on our socials. So that's Best or Worst Pod on Instagram and Facebook. And if you want to be on the show, let us know if you want to be on the show. We'd love to talk to you about your best or worst day.
Yep. A lot of fun.